All right. Sorry for that. Apologies for that. All right. What about now? Can you hear me, people at home? I hope so, yes. All right. So let's start with Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. From the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of Bodhicitta, on the peak of light resembling a clump of extremely white fresh curd, King of Dharma, Nissen Losam Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me on the lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme full of bearing from a mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanations is its ear ornament of those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, light-scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each of them one fervently grateful my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Sever, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect pure holy Gurus from the billion clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacles of those who subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I've collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losam Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. Sa-shi po-ki Ju-shi-me-to Tam-ri-ram-ling-shi Ni-de-gen-pa-di Sangye-shindu Mikde-owa Gil-doku-namda Shin-la-chu-pa-shu. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of victorious one Losam Drakpa, where the morality of eminently pure way of life was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idang Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyataya. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the heart of the path pure and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of 2 of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirits, harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and the imprints without exception. My body become as pure and clear as crystal. In page 13, we're going to recite the 5-line Mixima verse 3 times. Mimetse wete che chenrezi, jime kiembe wambo jampe yan, dupuma lu jomse sanweta, kanche kiembe tsuge tsongapa, losandra pe shabla sowade. Mimetse wete che chenrezi, jime kiembe wambo jampe yan, dupuma lu jomse sanweta, kanche kiembe tsuge tsongapa, losandra pe shabla sowade. Mimetse wete che chenrezi, jime kiembe wambo jampe yan, Dupu malu jomze samweta, kanche kebe tsugen tsongapa, losandra pe shabla sowa de.
Sanji Chetan Tsoji Chonala Chanjo Bardu Dani Kyabsuji Dagi Chushi Gibanda Dag Drolam Penshi Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Chetan Tsoji Chonala Chanjo Bardu Dani Kyabsuji Dagi Chushi Gibanda Dagi Drolam Penshi Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Chetan Tsoji Chonala Chancho Bardu Dani Kyabsuchi Dagi Chushi Jibanda Dagi Drolampi Sanji Drupara Sho Kanki Tuzi Nizone Tawa Tamji Bambi Jere Tambi Chun Dunze Bi Kwadam Jela Changzi Lo Good morning everyone. The young man choose to do this.
Yeah. The clock on Geshe's table is in a second. So probably we have to finish the session now. Let's do the dedication and go for food.
Chamban namando ni miwa de chikchash. Dadir dakazing himan samdini chikshucho chisro tangandu lamram chidan lamram shude wara da lamram shubi godin rodi inchimchik ani nimanimala susugi chik chawadin jeviton chik chetubana ani da pendong one de tin sarisro tindro chik samsons tangi.
And on the Friday morning teachings, we've been studying the presentation of the states of the path of enlightenment, the Lamrim. Geshe feels that if we take the Lamrim into our daily life, practice it daily in a daily life, we're going to receive the benefit from the Lamrim.
Lamrim kazus ni kazus chamba inaya chik susu mesiden devi tomi tes chikpa ani lalin tar matuwana ani danga drawla ya ani goba megyo do chik chagiro asro.
So if we listen to teachings, if we study daily the teachings of the Lamrim, but do not put it into practice, Geshe feels that we will not get the benefit from the from it. So, for example, Geshe set up, for example, someone like him, listening to those teachings, studies those teachings without putting them into practice, we will not get the benefit from them.
Direda dinza taking nge karishugores labainas ro. Anta lamrum gi tsawa di sanji chamden di chele ya tugyorwas. The Sanji Chamden di Chitangi Kongi Tadrup Karimba Kongi Pigi Tachik Lam Nimbo Karimba di and never Nini and the Lalin Chimachis and Tarn the Sanji Shawachik Yimba in the Yang and Korangi Tadrup Karimba di and a Toman in the Musrajili Teba in the Yang Kiran Jimmy di killing go das and Zawning Son your mares, Zawning Son your mares. And if he midi come down me valley doing ya then ya sanji salaya trigger was teaching around so in by the ya nimanimala chik susu pigi that's such than zinsu the shuk tabu shushin juche any chitsona roda to chugen rage modo never in the only turning until a going jingi Labishachik, Resha Samsung Roach. Andin Roach Sordig to Serati, any kind of the Ruruchi Degonza, and in Narangi Pigila, Sonan Kanyo, but one on Samali, Chick Pentos, a race and big Sonanchi, Chomba and Nangigi, Labshagi, Sra. That day, Nyanda Mene, Lalenta Made, Susurwa, Sra. 이내야 소수 따르지 용초그래 이내야 디 미셴바기 따르도 많잖아 민춘사기 메델야지 아니 시그나고 페이지다야 돈 나고 땡라 소바 안 데이터베기 아니 카동 떼라 소바 아니 롱라야 소바 디 디게 싸우니니 아 산지 공부도 tum바지 레몬도 왔어 공유뉴스 가리인 바이네야 공유뉴스 소수 신규는 디고라스 공유뉴스 소수 신규 디고라 이내야 마싱엔 텔레야 탑키브 톤 아니 아니 제비 톤이 바수 거들 제바이나 뱅그를 마도 아니 찍찍래야 야리 소리를 잡는 로데바이나 응한 사말로라야 펜도맹이 차바이나 야부분도 왔어
So then, if we think of what Geshe is saying here, well, the root of the Lamrim is based on the teachings that the Buddha, the Bhagavan, gave. And as such, the Buddha presented philosophical views and practices in those teachings of the steps of the path of enlightenment. Not only the Buddha spoke of them, this is what the Buddha practiced himself. The Buddha practiced the path, the very path itself, until the attainment of his own enlightenment. And yet, having attained the state of enlightenment, it's not that the Buddha taught exactly what he realized and did to all sentient beings, to all living beings. It's not that he said that you have to practice exactly in this way. You have to adopt these views and practice what I did. After all, there are different living beings with different dispositions, different mentalities, realms of existence, and the Buddha gave teachings in a way that corresponded to the different dispositions of different living beings. So then when we look at the way that we engage with others on a daily basis, so if we hold views that are very strong, if we think that our view is correct and whatever we practice is correct, and we try to then enforce it on others or expect others to put it into practice, it's not going to work out. So here there's an advice Geshe feels for all of us. So sometimes Geshe also is using the sessions that we have together in order to look at points like that. So if we can listen to what Geshe is saying and we can put it into practice, Geshe feels that there is a value in that. So we might have our own views about particular things. We might have either philosophical views or views about certain things. We might be putting things into practice. But if we expect that we're going to broadcast them to others or tell them to others and others have to accept them, if we then become very strict with that, if we're going to kind of be quiet, you could say, if we're going to express our displeasure when others don't listen to us, if we become too strict about it, well, we'll not be having in a way that accords with the intention of the Buddha, with the thought of the Buddha. If we know what the dispositions are of others, and then we can express things with a sense of care, with a sense of love to others, it will work in a better way, Geshe feels. If you have your own views and strong views, if you have your own views and own practices, and you rather than trying to approach others with a sense of care, if you become argumentative with them, if it gives rise to arguments and conflicts and so forth, it's not good and it's not going to be beneficial.
산지점된디 당한 산지점된디 진주 지원자 산지점된디 진주 될래야 고향 따와 생긴디 빼 마세와 계신부로 고향기 따와 지매와나 안간주 미치조 나로야 지 세대 바베비진 자원이니 데 투야 메어치 야차 야다 말이었어 간선난 간주 미르래야 삼로리요리 미르래야 따와리 용구요리 아니 수수기 따와다 만튼 세베젤래야 아니 지 고향 지 매와이나 그 용초그레 삼성기 따와 지금 매봐이나 가뒤는 수수 딱 나도 미치조는 마덴님 러사치기요 말아왔어 다 미치조는 대체에 질러야 미싱기기 비기 삼로 가리여 봐이나 디 용초그레 삼성기 딘지기 고향기 삼로 지어봐나 소소의 팽고라서
As students of the Buddha, we need to develop ways of thinking, of views which are spacious. This is really important. We live in society. We have to live in society, and therefore the way that we think and the way that we, the views that we have to be quite vast and spacious. If our mind, if the way that we think, if our views are not vast and spacious, since we have to live in society, we will have problems with others if our mind is not made spacious. So whatever, as we live in human society and people obviously are different to each other, then it is not unlikely that people have differences in the way that they think.
데레 진짜 고 냠바치 직바치 용토 말아서 배샤운데 소소레 죽은가 여바티야 아니 차마냠바치 린동 여바치 어딜레 배자라스 진짜 아니 코 차마냠바 이네야 콜이야 가르피치 여바 디톨이야 이츠마진 저바이나 소소레 여빈 죽은가디 차마냠바 이네야 콘 딕데도 아스로 디 고향 상로도 내바나 아니 로종 세디 용야 매교치 그러 아니 람롱 냠nen디야 용야 매교치 딘상한주 람롱 냠nen 기 시딘로 쪼딜이야 아니 고향 그 상로치 땡투바이나 안 자세자타 망한주다 아니 네 찍려야 그렇지 아니 냠도 아니 람름 아니 체니 냠nen치야디 부탁부 용야기 차진 쪼직래도 와서 대만도 아니 부스토부슈 시진간 가드이나야 지 아니 부스토부 장장다 지 계제디 간이 코나야 지 자만득이 장장 로지 고대와이나 아니 기분문도 왔어 기분문도 왔어 진짜 안 디조 돌아샤고야 돼 개체물로 당가 나는 숫다 몇장 찍소로 진짜 나들이야 믹스기 최신의 로지 쭉는 샤는 당 얘기 듣고 나랑 개인 소리 들어 아니 통고도 디즈니 라이브마다 양아디 아니 셴바케 메다스로
And since we do live in human societies, we also have to recognize that we are not, and the way that we think is not equal. It's like saying that, for example, if we look at the palm of our hands, we have 5 fingers and they're not even, they're not exactly the same. They, of course, they are of different sizes and they have their own functions, and this is completely okay. So similarly, when we also think of ourselves in human society, we're not all the same. We're not exactly the same. So then when you think about it like that, and in your mind, kind of you make your mind become more relaxed, more spacious, in being able to consider that not everyone is the same. So in terms of training your mind, in terms of putting the Lamrim into practice, you can do it in a way that is more vast and spacious. So if you train in making your mind vast and spacious, wherever you are, wherever you stay, you can practice well the steps of the path to enlightenment. Your training, your practice of the Lamrim can become excellent. Whereas if your mind becomes uptight, right? If you're too strict, or if your mind becomes uptight, there are always things that will not work out for you. There'll always be something that is not right. And that will make your mind unhappy. So Geshe thought of saying that because here, when we look at ourselves, for example, we can consider ourselves as belonging to one family. And therefore, Geshe also feels that this is his responsibility to bring up such issues, such points.
어디래자 다 디툴라 샤브톤 드닝 안도 다 데리 쉐투 카르레스 라운드 카지 삼데 당안도 균제 듄 기토니 로장단티 로 야스침보 조지반데 아디샤기 다 셈게단기 담가디 균제 맹아 듄 토니다 셈게단지 송요라다 디조 디링 안도 아니 균제 맹아 듄 골이야 아니 로 카운터스 장고리 균제 맹아 듄 카르레스 디 this year is
Having said that, we're going to go back to the text. We're looking at the milling presentation of the steps of the path to enlightenment. Currently, we're looking at the steps of the path of those of the great scope. And in the previous session, we arrived at a section of the text that teaches how to train a mind in bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And the first technique that we're going to study is the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions and method that was taught by Atisha. Right, so it is a way of developing bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, through the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions. So let's look at how we train in that method.
Terda günde dünis zobi sangi chanju gi semni chonglas. Da lugdog ton ma ngotre che dian kumiksi chi giresra. Tagarama shujagindas. Günde dün zobi sangi chanju gi semni chongla. Sem de laksam le dan, samba di ninji le dan, ninji chambale. Chamba tendu sobale. Tenzu ni tintemba, tintemba ni man tongale chongde dünos.
So I'm looking at the text, beginning with the sevenfold instructions on training in bodhicitta. So the sevenfold cause and effect instructions transmitted from Atisha begin with recounting the sevenfold cause and effect process from a reverse order perspective, right? So we begin with the result, bodhicitta, and then we trace it back in a reverse order. So, and there's a point in teaching it in this way in a reverse order. So the sevenfold cause and effect instruction is this. A complete Buddha is born from bodhicitta. This mind from the extraordinary attitude. This attitude from compassion. Compassion from love. Love from the wish to repay the kindness. The wish to repay the kindness from remembering the kindness. And remembering the kindness from seeing beings as one's own mother. So there are 2 points: generating certainty concerning the stages and actual gradual training.
다들 nganzu dina karsung dus laundige kapdula shibaina nganzu tobja tartubadi sangi kompanderis sangi kompandi da gyume gemel deni chongmayin ba gyugel deni chongya gyugel zodi chanjuk semderis ro.
Final object of attainment is Buddhahood. And Buddhahood is not attained without causes and conditions. It is not a causeless state. The main cause for Buddhahood is bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment.
그러다 chanjuk semsana 심전 탐지기 체도다 심전 탐지기 된 산지 공반식 토벌 좌우 냠비기 somebody's the dimdig somebody called in the chungurslavi and laksam said laksam di laksam den chungares.
Since the main cause for Buddhahood is bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta is the mind that thinks, I will attain the state of enlightenment in order to fulfill the welfare, to enact the welfare of all sentient beings. And bodhicitta is born from the wholehearted resolve, as here Lama Tsongkhapa says, right? So it says, a complete Buddha is born from bodhicitta, the mind from the extraordinary attitude. The extraordinary attitude is the wholehearted resolve. Sometimes it is called the highest intention, the special intention, the extraordinary attitude, or the wholehearted resolve.
레달 학섬 디 학섬 기웅 가르 학섬 갈덴니 총바레스 라운디 학섬 디 닌지레 덴니 총바레스 로드 딘시고다 닌지 더 닌지 슬라운디 더 심잔 탐지 베기 대원 되버다 동건 문대비 더지 심진 요도 쪼디 동안데 전 지마루 냠비기 somebody 닌지레스 인자 학섬 디 델덴니 총바레스.
And the extraordinary attitude is born from compassion, which is sustained to all sentient beings in recognizing that all sentient beings are equal in terms of seeking happiness, and all sentient beings are equal in wanting to be free from suffering, in thinking, may all sentient beings be free from suffering. This is compassion from which the extraordinary attitude is born.
Redinza that didn't let them injil let them be laxam di kandrajiris, laxam korang wong kandrajiris lawandi. Simjan tamje dunga the trana chimoro nyambi, some mindset. Simjan tamje dunga the tawadi. Daki chawu nyambi, ngararangi chegi nyambi, load of telea, laxam sigdos. Chidan inji imbalaya, susu be, susu rani chegi sambi, load of telea, laxam sigris, laxam.
So we said that from compassion arises the extraordinary attitude. So what is that extraordinary attitude? The extraordinary attitude is not only thinking, may all sentient beings be free from suffering, but it is thinking, I will do it. I will make it so that sentient beings are free from suffering. This is the extraordinary attitude.
The dindri ninji de chambal den chombares. Tachidan laksam gi gu ninji the chamba sedi, savi chitangi chani, and korum ngeji yomares. The korum dina dik chogor mato korum ngeji siki yomares. Rachik deva denduku somebody, chik dunga the tanduku somebody, dini would chik any castle that chik manzu do tripshi pigila chik. Kandras shava na sha chogro dinashi soroji chagores.
And here Lama Tsongkhapa says that compassion arises from love. Now, when it says that compassion arises from love, it's not to say that the order is definite. So when we think of the extraordinary attitude in which we think that I will make it so that sentient beings are free from suffering, I will free sentient beings from suffering, the causes for that extraordinary attitude are loving kindness or love and compassion. The order is not certain, it's not definite. When we distinguish between love or loving kindness and compassion, well, love is the wish for others to be happy, and compassion is the wish for them to be free from suffering. So there is no definite order to the development of these two in terms of them being the causes of the extraordinary attitude.
Kanji and Laksam Zawa Ninji Senandra and Chamba Sedida and Namasanji and Teba Chimbu, the Chugi Zawa di Delia Tuni, Sunguyores, Delia Tun Sungor, the Digash Yatamba Diris.
Which means that the root of the extraordinary attitude are compassion and love. And as such, also the root of the teachings of the Buddha, the Bhagavan, definitely 100% certainty that loving kindness and compassion are the root of the Buddha's teachings.
Dere da dit zawa imba diang kansana nganzu dewa dugu yore dungan dugu yo mares. Dedu gi ani ji pigi da dewa yonda mayon di zo ninji da chamba da ninji le ya rali dewa shikro ninji sena zewa di zewa yona ani chamba yon ya chik zewa mena ani dunga yon ya chik da dida jaja ja tamba ni nganzu du sam tamba ina zambali di chibu tole sam tamba ina ya nganzu chamzi kajuski ani mandawa chamzi mesala ya ani tukye mawa dunga mawa tamanti bo mawa yungu yobati jaja ja tamba ros kajuski chamzi yosagi lombatele ya ani shide pawe mawa bena namen rojine ya chigchile ya chamzi ya pujiyo bana kaduina ani zimomo chin gemotsi chin kibuchin dech yungu yorasra an chokba jimba ya chik chome nang penjole ya chik chamzi yo bana ani ko pigile ya tamanti ba kharine yong chore yongba ya donlen che tuge chik din meba ina chigchile ya den sam da thagdog da chik magawi logic ma to meba ina an tesm chik man chomba ya di kenchimbu chadech di yungu yorasra dinza 아니 잠바원 인지 개침부 임바디 무유 네술이야 랑안주 대화대보다 동문민디 위켄로 쓰러지기 바이네야 잠지 고야디 무유레스 랑 무유레스
지선 그랑기 세월에 점프 연결했어야 되라 세월탄 점프 디니라 개와 가르쳐기
세워디 인지라라 인지라 동한테 전도가 상바였나 대원디도
죄송 갑디라 세웠다 닌지 찍었어.
지거려. 야.
So with the root of the extraordinary attitude being loving kindness or love and compassion, we recognize that everyone is equal in terms of wanting to be happy and wanting to avoid suffering. So from that recognition that everyone is seeking happiness and well-being and everyone wants to avoid suffering and pain, from that will come compassion. You will develop compassion. So in that sense, you can say that loving kindness is also developed from compassion, and compassion is developed from loving kindness. And we can see the effect that those attitudes have over our mind. Like, for example, when our compassion to others is not sufficient, when we don't have enough care for others, we can see that on a personal level, we have more problems, more difficulties. We experience more pain when our compassion is not sufficient. Whereas when we do have a greater degree of love and compassion towards others, we can see that we can see the way that it affects, for example, our family unit. So there is more peace and well-being. We're able to spend more happy times together, to feel joyous and happy with each other. And it also affects the societies, organizations, the groups that we belong to. In that, with a sense of concern for others, with loving kindness, with compassion, we might experience difficulties, but we can take them on. We can take them up if we have enough loving kindness and compassion. If these attitudes are not strong enough, if we have a sense of dislike to others, if we're unhappy with each other, if we dislike each other, even trivial situations can become big stories in our mind. And therefore, loving kindness and compassion are imperative.
nganzu기 참전에 상무야 마담에나 당간주 nganzu 제리스 로니에 칸이야 대기스 라고라 제리스 로니에 칸슬라마스나 닌지기 로종 체사기 로니에 칸 닌지 로종 체사기 로니에 칸 제리스 로니에 칸스는 딜리로 차고래서 오늘 된 거야 수결바이나 닌지 로종 체사기 로니에 칸 라고 차고라스 민디.
So then when we think about it, we live at Chenrezig Institute, right? Now, when we think of living here at Chenrezig Institute, what it means when we think of Chenrezig is we're here in a place in which we study compassion. We train in compassion as we live at Chenrezig Institute.
데르달 제리스 롬니르 칸기 닌지 롬니르 칸기 게겐기 닌지 모두 체마토와나 게겐기 께레스 야샤자타마 게겐기 께로스 다 게두기 아니 닌지라야 로종 마셔와나 게두기 께레마도 게겐라 체스 케어 마로스 게귤라 체스 케어 마로스 데르다 아니 권진 조임바나야 비 초분 진경 칭해 임바나야 닌지 롬니르 칸디 진경 치원자 디기 롬니르부터 다보자고야 진경 치고야 디 개치시는 게 치시들이스 디기 따지 아니 gelabto solaya tado chigo heta genzi sugo zo 들어왔어 장무시원 zo 들어 다 디다 냠도 먼저 튕규르 벤줄라 소바 고고레 디두 고고레 메타메리 이네야 개체시 조 지야디 아니 비게 gelabto기 아니 데둘라야 따고야디 개치시레스 양 gelabto 콘정간도 데둘라 땅에 레슬랍진 와여진 콘주 칸 라바디 찜메다는 로바이나 양 gelabto기다 농주로스 진짜 원참아 로기 아니 니버치가야 폰이 내가 쳐봐나 난 제리스 롬니에 칸디 원에 탄니 텐드 뎀비 제리스 롬니에 칸지 소투 그래서라 난 미 남주 요리 공기 깨우 담아주 나한테 난 뭐투에 균센스 키어 말았어
Can you get up like that?
get to the loma gegen the loma.
Okay. So then if we think of living here and working at Chenrezig Institute, and Chenrezig stands for compassion, if Geshe being the teacher here is not explaining what compassion is, well, there's a problem here. But it could be that he's giving an explanation of what compassion is, but no, for us as students, if we don't put it into practice, then no, it might be that you get an explanation from a teacher, it is coming through a translator or interpreter, but if you don't put it into practice, it's not their problem, it is your problem, it is your fault. And it's not only the point for the teachers and the students here at the center, we also have staff members. No, so also when we think of the staff members here in taking care of different areas at Chenrezig Institute, then we need to think that since this is Chenrezig Institute, which means that it is a place in which we train in compassion, that we need to care for one another, to have the sense of care in the teachers and students and so forth. So of course, there are certain areas of the center that we still need to take care of. We need to have enough funds to run. We need to make sure that we have enough money to continue functioning. But the core value, the core aspect should be compassion if this is Chenrezig Institute. So then this is the most important thing Geshe feels amongst teachers and students and so forth. So keep that in mind, that the main thing that we train it is compassion. And as such, we will also, you can say, fulfill the meaning of the name Chenrezig Institute. Institute being a place of training, a place of study, a place of training.
데르딘자다 nganzo ninjilomnyir chingenge ta chi gelab chongone ani meshenlaya ani chi ninjilobjon chedangge mikbe sambuji tem matubainaya mikbe ngembachik mandro ya chegoyadi nganzo chammi genres ro lama sohormuchi ngone tanigi tu chembu toni ta chi ani ngan samolaya sito nan shubadia chi yakbuji chigre gonchinro remado ta dusugi ken jong mar ki tu mare gonchini angazdele ya ruruchinta chagyusik mare was di ngaz be samdang goya be kichemuro jin tongu dosro ngani.
And as such, when we think of ourselves as students and teachers here at the center, then we need to set a good example for others in terms of the practice of compassion. And if we cannot set a good example for others, a person that others look up to, at least we need to make sure that we do not set a bad example to others. After all, when we think of, for example, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is the spiritual director of this organization, Lama Zopa Rinpoche is wishing that we will attain a good outcome from our training. No, not expecting things to go bad, but is wishing or hoping for good outcome of our involvement here. So this is also something that we need to think of.
데르다 다 년지 아니 년지 냠래 마요야 조디 tam mombar was ro mombari ani chi shedan la soba chagdo la soba ta digi da ngonne thane gi chitso trunge ani soba trunge nami trug shange genda gedu parala ya trukshin gyabdengi gi so di bigi da ani nyumu toksum di di chagores ro di chagores ta ngan thong matu jire madu di chagores dinza lamrum lojong cheni bigi ya kabde chaksa so di nyumu toksum di yimba di ngun zimbitoni ani lamrum nima lojong chebayna yashi gyadam sosola ya pemba chiki yungu yores ro.
So then if our compassion is not sufficient, if our mind still is still controlled by confusion or ignorance, by anger, by jealousy and so forth, we can see that we'll find it difficult to get along in our family, in the center or other organizations that we might belong to. We will not be able to get along in our relationship, in teachers and student relationship and so forth. All of those disagreements, not being able to get along with each other, is attributed to the three poisonous afflictions, to anger, attachment, and ignorance. And if we recognize that and daily we put the steps of the path of enlightenment into practice, we'll receive benefit from that.
Di 계란주 직 식다 단단한 땜빈 제놈 직 갸갈이야 땜빈 제놈 직 직도 아스티라니 카징이 모두 제마손 대상 디츠 직 아니 벽게 돌아야 줄샤주지 나 뭐시바 딘디 땅선 가즈기니가 동바인정이 레위 뉴시버 때임바 레위 뉴시버 다 디나 직 때바이나 근데 원내 잔이기 아니 지속디 참된 마용이야 아니 죽신 참만지바 용야기 자와디 아니 직 젠섬다 차도다 어디 임바디 시부 쇼지 아니 통투야지 아니 냥코랑 균 통투야지 쇠샤스 디자차 자타망한지 참sam라야지 아니 드발이야 텐투바이나 자차 자타마 디펜토야서레스 로베 아니 직 갈서다 오니 인구 탭투야지 딘디기 아 템비기 로기 야고시 딩도 왔을 때 자가 아
세전디 때모치 로알라.
그래 때문에 니레우 뉴스 담바 버테임바 니만니는 숨지르나야 배 마세만인지도 아마
Recently, Geshe got a link to a TV series that was made in India, depicting the life of the Buddha and the different events that occurred in the time of the Buddha. So Geshe hasn't seen that before, and someone recently have translated that into Tibetan. Right, so it was available in Hindi. And it was recently translated into Tibetan from someone in Tibet. So Geshe managed to squeeze in watching some 20 odd episodes in 3 days. In 2 or 3 days, Geshe watched like 20 episodes. And he said that he actually seen kind of things that he hasn't had before. You know, one of the things that's stood out to him, and I don't know if you can say binge watching the life story of the Buddha. Anyway, so one of the things that Geshe kind of that came up in that TV series was the conflicts that we experience in human society, right? So how it is so clear that the problems, the conflicts that we experience amongst ourselves living in human society are based on attitudes such as competitiveness and jealousy and so forth. We can see that clearly.
들다 니도 스텝이야 가서 다지 로치치 드림친 답이야 때데라다 내가 샵슝에 디 칼락도 생일 해마게라 참서 간들을 채고는 삼삼
Geshe was totally engrossed in watching this TV series, and there were people around Geshe that kind of, since he was in Tibetan, and once in a while asked Geshe, so what is saying? What are they saying? And Geshe kind of was like ignoring them. He's like, I'm watching it now.
근데 때 얌참바질라 다디 지단 갸르브려다 right 아니 이나야 지 갸르칸 나올라야 지 칼라 쇼직 데야다 지 비기 아니 아라라 소바시 때스 아라통데 지 렌세 지그날 튼동신 두마도 지 아니 칼라 디탈레 칸지 칼라 케원지 딘리로진도 모두 칼라 꼴치에면도 레위 뉴시도 나올라야 칼라사 비기 나미냠데 칼라사 데와 자르칸나 칼라마부티 직진의 용 광연도 저러다 치에면도 디얌참바질이야 로지 짱짱 비긴 렌섬다 타도도 딘디 짱짱 그 돈이 찍찍을 옆에 너스 당대지면도 기부 당대 치에면도
Anyway, I guess I watched like 20 odd episodes, and now when you think of having a TV series and different scenes in the TV series, you would think that there would probably be scenes of people sitting together having food. So like, an elaborate presentation of food or alcohol. A little bit of alcohol also is a seller in those TV series. But Geshe said that so far he watched like 20 episodes, no food at all. So think about watching something, and there are no scenes involving food and so forth. It's mainly only dealing with those activities or those events taken from the life of the Buddha, and also presenting how the different conflicts and problems and so forth that we experience in human society arise from our afflictive emotions, the 3 poisons.
레드니 다주 다 야부션 돈도 템버쯤 된디 다지 그게 콩으로 왔다 콩기 다 남주다 콩기 잠재다 콩기 학습 콩기 잔댕기 토니 아니 지존하는 마치 드론디 드니치 인구 마탱이 무수치게 매바치 어 딘딘 인지 우지 땡샤스 다 디르와스 다 디인고라서 아니 비기 드라캅티 가주스 용바인바이냐 코로나 연료치칭이 간드시 용바인바이냐 배 아니치 동기 남규장야 마셔 치치니 아니 동네 제토야 랭갸토야 배 아니 파쇼마 라메바 아니 치마 구드야 딘디게 아니 제놈 야고 쇼지 릭샤스라 난배 야고 디마도 딘디 때문에 겨를 못지다 다니 거라메스라 디배 마스바더니 아니 소스세미나에 네바로치 그렇다는데 산지기 출을 장자거든 오늘 딘디지라 삼성로치 아니 소화지 제송스
Anyway, depicting the life story of the Buddha in that TV series that Geshe was binging on, then the Buddha having the sense of intelligence of interactions with others, interacting with others on the basis of a sense of loving kindness and compassion and affinity and so forth. So there's not even one scene in which the Buddha responded in an unfavorable way to a certain event that took place. So when he encountered a harmdoer or an enemy or so forth, there was not even one scene in which the Buddha responded in not being kind to the person. Rather than that, he was able to take it on and respond to a certain situation, at least in that TV series, in a really good way. I guess I feels like just kind of seeing it like that, not just kind of hearing about the Buddha, but kind of watching, let's say, a TV series and kind of thinking about it. Kind of when Geshe said that when he thinks of the Buddha and how the Buddha acted, then Geshe feels that when it is kind of presented like that, it makes you think that it is like the Buddha was like that. This is how we want to train.
데르다디나 당이 람럼으로 다스팅이 람럼 데디나로 좀 춘중지다 춘중지 춘중 가르스나 야부션 된주다 공기다 꿈치 아니 파핑구다 아니 빙자란다다 린진이 뭐디 춘중 갈라야다 아니 칠로를 쯤자로다 린진 그 가도 있느냐 야부션 된주려야 젠심 짱짱 치도 다콘 칠로를 쯤자로 콘전 다그쯤지 온디 아니 린진디 제단 다피 스르부 제단 스르레도 이제 야부션 된주들 라키고다 다 거기 남칼라 잠포론딘 다잡네 차치 살사로다 살사로디 다 콘도 죽샬렌 피 차들랭가로다 죽샬렌 조원디 야부션돈 쪽포 쇼주진 렌진 질하로다 아니 야부션돈 빙엘레니 차디디 틸레디 차디디 탁사데셔와 이나 쿠출루 소존진 차디디야 템버스토 딘디질라 렌진 레우더라 렌진 차디 코레라다 야부전들을 떼고 차등 이랬어. 그 속 내껴봐있어. 인증 내권은 다 잡아이. 그랬어. 다 코인 들리지는 첨간을 내기다. 첨간을 내디게 아니 다팀 늘래라. 아니 다 콘도 첨다 지기다. 다 원진 속 경에디 자 다음에 디속 경에디 그 다고 차고라. 양 첨질래야 그다 잡는 그 다음에 디세는 그 다고 차로다. That's what that is. And the transit like that. And transit that tea and we big that Shabana, so young and dear double is. Then on the Chimton Shabana, singing their double is. Then warning on touch to my chat Koran, my kitchen was. The chat pagi kid on era. Yavushon don't the linging in their liar, the chat big kid, chat so tangada. 차스 다운디 차드 전된로 살리다 코타로 다 니저시스 베니저디.
Anyway, I guess I'm supposed to be teaching the Lamrim to speak about the sense of the path of enlightenment, but since he mentioned that he watched a TV series of the events taking place in the life story of the Buddha, then the Buddha, Prince Shuddhana, had a cousin, Devadatta. Now, Devadatta was someone that was always jealous of the Buddha, always trying to compete with the Buddha. So in one of the episodes that Geshe watched in the last couple of days, it is said that they were also competing in archery. So Devadatta was a good archer, but also the Buddha, of course, was a good archer. So one day, Devadatta they went out shooting arrows, and Devadatta saw a bird in the sky, shoot an arrow, and brought that bird down. So it was kind of falling down from the sky in the distance, and of course, they had to run to the side where the bird fell down. So the Buddha was faster than Devadatta. You go to that scene earlier, and the bird was already bleeding, but the Buddha took the bird in his hand and due to his power was able to resuscitate the bird and make it heal. So Devadatta got to the scene and said that, what are you doing? This is my bird. I shot it. The Buddha said that, no, this is my bird because I saved it. I saved its life. So they had that argument. Who should get that bird? The person that shot the arrow, brought it down, or the person that saved the bird? So they went to a certain court of arbitration, let's say that, court of arbitration, and they asked a Brahmin that was responsible for mitigating that case. So the Brahmin that was arbitrating or mitigating that case said that actually, when you think about it, indeed, that bird on one hand should belong to the person who shot it down, shot an arrow in it, and the same case, or the same token, you can say that it also should be of the one who saves its life. So it's hard to really resolve that case. Let's ask the bird. All right, so the Brahmin was sitting in one place, then the Buddha and Devadatta was sitting in front of it. The doors opened and the bird marched in. So the bird marched in. Now the bird was supposed to kind of decide who's responsible for that bird, and at the end it chose the Buddha, the person who saves its life.
지단다 탑자다 있네. 야다 뭐 잠재 술을 여봐 있나요? 저 잠바도 째버싱이 술을 여봐 있나요? 안 델야 참은 코리아식. 저 란신 코리아식. 가오치야식. 저 간주 비기 둔주 심제이니야. 젠진 비기르다 비기게. 직 뒤따도 비기게. 아니 샤타 짠짠 론체 댕이 짐바이니야. 바 잠보 제바이나. 수 가오치야디. 수 가오치야디. 야차자다 연구였어리스. 딘자 아니 산지비 추 자와 닌지 송여려야 임탁추 로 딘자 딩안주다 아니 닌지 로니 칸이야 데니 안주 닌지 라야 로종체 아니 닌지 추스스마다 아니 닌지 또기 착도단 젠셈다 아니 지 컨트롤 서버디 아니 네버스 어두 세고야다 디레샤스로
So of course you can say that this is just a TV series, it's a drama. But still Geshe feels that when you think of what scenes like that at least illustrate for us, they illustrate that with the development of loving kindness and compassion, when we have that sense of care between one another, then we can develop a sense of joy and happiness and sense of affinity between one another. Not only between ourselves as human beings, but it can also happen with other living beings, even with wild animals, as this story kind of shows. You can even have a wild animal, someone that is, a meat, or an animal that is a meat eater. And still, if you treat it well, if you treat it with a sense of love and care, then even a wild animal can come to like you, to love you in response. So the Buddha taught the way to develop compassion, and we that live here at Chimrezik Institute, as Chimrezik is symbolic of compassion, we take it up in our training. So we develop compassion. At least we make sure that we do not damage or waste the compassion that we have, and through the development of compassion, we come to eliminate our afflictive states of mind, anger, animosity, and so forth.
There dindi da injim chamba di kalden chongba res laundi. Tin so go nyambi lolden. Tin so go nyambi. Ani chamba ni tin to so le dance. Tin to so ni tin chamba. That tin chamba da tin so ni le deni yungres.
So we're trying in love and compassion. So it says here, compassion from love from the wish to repay the kindness of sentient beings. And the wish to repay the kindness of sentient beings comes from remembering the kindness or becoming mindful of the kindness of sentient beings.
The tin chamba di mar thonal deni chongte dunos laun da dire. Da ani kam man thoma di ani tin chimbo imbachi thongores songorada. Kam man thoma dilaya tin chimbo imbachi thongores. Dinza ani simjian tamje man thongye yobachi. Da songores ra simjian tamje la ya man thongye yobachi. Da di dire da ra.
So thinking of the kindness of all sentient beings, becoming mindful of this, the kindness of all sentient beings comes from seeing beings as one's own mother. So this is something that we need to see. We need to come to see all sentient beings as having been our mothers.
Terdan anzu da din sar da nyor sar dor de ya khazu gi pigila ya chi ani an kale khabu nyor da saw yo ba di ani nga khadu na sam gu yo di ko ani nenga che da ya di nenga roj pa chi tro tu na ya ani so su sem na la pen to chen bu ji gu yo za ani kari la ya kale khabu yo ba tel ya ani mix kan ni ani bezun chen lo jong che go ya sam dang go ya de pe ke chen bu re sha din za da simjan tam je ma kan da cha gre se 딩안주 샘 넘어야 더 티와 요고에 쪼디 심전 탐제 마 칸드스 차그리세 디리스로.
So then in thinking of the sequence that was presented here, the development of the man of enlightenment in through the sevenfold cause and effect process, it was presented in reverse order. And when you think of the points that are presented here, you can see how they become increasingly more difficult and more complicated. But the point is that when you recognize the complicated points in the practice, if you focus on them, if you focus directly on things which are difficult, which are complicated, then and you focus on them in your training, you get benefit from that. So then the question at hand here is, how do you come to see all sentient beings as having been your mothers?
데르다디 다츠디 개왕하실래야 또니 송고야 지 차고레스 로 심저 탐제 마슬라디 안주 깨야디 컨디션 깨버레스 로 깨디 굿메 깨메질레 때니 깨버레 규겐질레 때니 깨버레스 디로다 다 규겐질레 때니 깨버 임바디 다 대상 망치야 라트고르다 딘자다 딘디 규겐디 아니 첸 디쌈 토니 트버리 아니 원나 첸 디 마힘바기 아니 뒤신질이야 총바리 이슬람디 더 뒤신질이야 로 뒤신질이야 총인바디 아니 야시자다 말어스 딘자 더 뒤신디 더 깨와 신슬라마스나 아니 신딜이 신비 뒤딜이야 아니 깨와 신리스로 더 딘지기 상다운디 깨와 신의 신여바디 깨와 신의 신여바는 깨와 신디 신디 온디 지비 신디 깨와를 지니 아니 하마당 치마를 샤니 the dinti namshadi ani masha bayina nganzu tsendi yotsu koran ani shema tu bachawanza dinti namshadi ani karsoga öme girbi drup chogorela ya ko ani gyudan gyugin tendi giribati ya ani tsendi on the chibigi ani ngamada chimadi di drup chogoresro 다 디드온디 개왕하시 생에디 드니 강나 강섬지 드니 보토야지 어두 제니다 개왕하마요나 개왕하마디 유카레스 개왕하마디 에네 마수치 그래 개와치마요나 개와치마디 마수치 그래스 아니 개왕하마는 가마 두 가주바디 요레스 아니 장가 가주바디 요레스야 딘지 돈시온디 아니 개와 탐메바지 개와 탐메발이야 아니 마 탐메바 요바디 딘자 아니 다 마수치 뇽바레 수치 마뇨바레스 두 시온디 야샤 야담바 아니 다시 란디 셴비기 심제 탐지기 란기 마 제녀바디 아니 리그비 드루트게치 타르투나 아니 리그비 드루트게치 라 먼저 세리비기 리그비 다치 안 드루탄조라 디난 셴로지 라다 딜리 띵사바지 그래도 아스라 어 딘디기 리그비 드루트게지 안사 심제 탐지 마 제녀바디 리그비 드루니 아니 소순 듄라야 수여바디야 어 디앙이 마 제녀바리야 삼성 로직 야시자도 깨쳐고레스 라
So then in recognizing that sentient beings have been our mothers here, that is based on thinking of past and future lives. Now, in order to think of past and future lives, we begin with thinking of this birth, right? So past and future lives, so in Buddhist terminology, we speak of the words that are used to express it are past births and future births. So when we think of this birth, well, has this birth occurred without any causes, without conditions? The current birth that we have did not occur without causes, without conditions. It depended upon cause and conditions. And since this birth occurred due to cause and conditions, then we can think cause and conditions contributing to birth occurred only once. In that, is it only this life? Or is it possible also for those cause and conditions to occur in other times as well? If it is possible for such cause and conditions to occur at other times as well, it means that this birth is not the only birth that we have, that also other births at other times are possible. So then when we think about it in terms of putting it on a certain time span, then if this lifetime is your point of reference, there were births that occurred at other times, which means that have occurred before this birth, and that births that will occur after this birth. In that sense, you can use that reason in order to think of past births and future births. And that being the case, then when you think of how was I born in this life, for example, in this life I was born from a mother. And since the births that have occurred in the past and those that will occur in the future, and when we start to think of how many births, for example, have already taken in the past, there were countless births. How many of them will occur in the future? Also a great many. So when you think of already, for example, having been through countless rebirths, then when you look at living beings, can you say that that particular individual has been my mother before, whereas the other one has not been my mother? You cannot really say that that person has been my mother while the other person has not been my mother if the times that we've already been through birth are countless. And therefore, using this reason, which is a very kind of, you can say subtle reason, you can conclude therefore that all sentient beings have acted as your mother. In some sense, you can say that you kind of using this analytical process, this thinking in a way that you would approach a scientific research, right? So thinking of, well, I have countless rebirths. Within them, I cannot say that that person has not been my mother before and another one has been my mother before. So therefore, you conclude that all of them have been my mothers. So this is the rational process that we go through. And then when you think of the people that are around you, the one that you see in front of you, you can therefore think that the person here in front of me has been my mother before.
어디에 된자다 마 체념만 통디 따라 다랑기 마 체념만 통디 아니 콜이야 다랑기 다치 이용기 넘바지 샤르고서데스라 간스나 랭안조기다 마임바지 통디 아니 수수 ཉ인바지 통거로 왔다라 마임바 통디 수수 ཉ다 ཉ인 통디 ཉ인 통디 아니 즉 잠바다 인지 용야디 그 추니 로지레도 asra nganzu majamba yimbaynya jamba majebaynya bigita 즉 아니 즉 착바데 제비 토니 아니 년진 통바이냐 텔레야 착바데 제비 세워치 잠바치 레고라스로 어디리다 딘자 아니 bigita repeat drivni 년임바치 driv투와이나 아니 텔라 미비 잠바디 란싱 길레치 아니 디 까진 친구인바 마리 이슬라운디 마디 원이 미치 사운당에 지마이나 마디 가주스 까진 짱으로 먼저 녀리 나라야 지 족보리 나로 버싱에레스 아니 짜친문 젠데야디 원이 나라 여바디 룽아 익섬로 주다 먼저 때 미지 칸자 아니 비기 사운당서디 류 톨레 사운다 류 징에디 마차와인자 다 딜을 사와지 먼저 메센델이야 제샤 슈슈 키요마로 다 딘지 류디아 직 징에디 마차완자 마디 닝 타르투고 세야디 라우라나 송 닝 타르투고 마레스 다 딘지 통월 때니 닝 진천부인바 다 진천부인바 땅이 될에 틀린지 자고 삼비기 상로디 다 미센덴지나 용거라스더라 아니 딘자 진소세야디 다 디도니 참바데 닝지 기그레스 어저마 딘지 송고도 아스라
And when you think of a certain person having been your mother before, a sense of affection arises with respect to that person. So when we think of someone that is close to your heart, when you develop a sense of closeness to another person, like for example, when you think that that person has been my mother before, a sense of closeness arises with respect to that person. And if you have a sense of closeness arising in your mind, when you see that person as being close to your heart, then naturally love and compassion will arise in relation to that person. Even without training in loving kindness and compassion, we can see that we have a natural sense of love and compassion to those who are close to our hearts, albeit mixed with attachment. We still have love and compassion towards them, even if they are mixed with attachment for the time being. So if we then focus on the recognition of sentient beings having acted as a mother, and we will then recognize that indeed they have been a mother, a sense of care will arise in respect to them. We'll then start to recognize, to remember the kindness that they have extended to us before. Like, for example, you can appreciate the kindness of another person, thinking that they were very kind to me, they helped me in one way or another. So when you think of the help and the assistance that you got from that person, a sense of appreciation of the kindness arises in your mind. So then when you think of the way in which your mother helped you, you can say that the greater gift that your mother gave to you is your body. In that sense, there is no comparison between the body that we got from a mother and other things that we get from other living beings. The greatest thing that we got from a mother is our body. And therefore, when you think of the final closeness that you can develop in your mind to another person, it would be to your mother, because she gave you your body, and therefore she was so kind to you. So when we recognize that, we then also think, I therefore need to repay the kindness of my mother. Actually, an excellent person is a person that not only can recognize or appreciate the kindness of others, but they also develop the wish to repay the kindness of others. So this is how we think in relation to this practice. We recognize sentient beings as having been our mothers. We then think of their kindness, and then we develop the wish to repay their kindness.
예, 다 딘디기 든 디스 든노스 단 딜러 니스 다 딘디기 균데 맹아 든라야 아니 로종이 럼바 레야 녜바께 왔어. 아, 림진디 자와 ngoso 담발라 니 티징기 람지 자와 닌지 템바탄 균데 시에는 디 균데순 규출로 담발로 숨 토마르 케체와 바르도 케체와 타마 케체오 담발은 닌지 쳔비 이견이 심전 탐진 코올린 뱀비철 녜바 담자와 귤라 Ninji mena teder cheba mumbi draw malubo drew kurkevan delarali bi cherdan. Kurdi menzena teaching bar and Mitsubi cher ninji no tomar kacheo. Lodri Mississippi tembalis Zumba Shari Sharanda du Bojan Samban Namji Ninji Chembo Meseto. Chisher Shina Hundu Chero. Zumba Shari the Dati Pena U Chinandu Giwani Mi Sok Ombi Hundu Drawino. Tejandu Chanju Sembi Ninji Chembo the Teba Chembo Yanda Hundu Drawino she Tam. Gaya Gorili Kyang, Jambal Chanju Sambanam Jubi Zomban Chi, Nen Khan, Jambal Gimeba, Payupo, Chanju Sambanam Jubi Zomban, Ninji Chambo, Nen Simjano, Shesos.
So in relation to the explanation of the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions, there are 2 points: generating certainty concerning the stages and the actual gradual training in this practice. Let's begin with the first point, generating certainty concerning the stages. This has 2 points: the way compassion is the root of the Mahayana, and the way the other causes and effects become causes and effects of that compassion. Beginning with the way compassion is the root of the Mahayana, it says that there are 3 points: the importance of compassion at the beginning, the importance of compassion in the middle, and the importance of compassion at the end. Let's start with looking at the importance of compassion at the beginning. And it says, if your mind is moved by great compassion, you will certainly resolve to free sentient beings from cyclic existence. However, if your compassion is inferior, your deeds will not come about. Therefore, whether you take responsibility for liberating all beings without exception depends on that compassion. And if you do not take that responsibility, you do not enter the Mahayana. This is why compassion is important at the beginning. The teachings of Akashyamati Sutra says, Venerable Sharvariputra, the great compassion of the Bodhisattvas is inexhaustible. Why is that? It is because it is preliminary. Venerable Sharvariputra, it is like this. By way of analogy, just as the inward and outward flow of the breath is a preliminary for our human life force faculty, likewise, the great compassion of the Bodhisattvas is a preliminary for perfectly accomplishing the Mahayana. The Guya Sirsha Hill Sutra says, Manjushri, what initiates the conduct of Bodhisattvas? What is its object? Manjushri replied, Divine child, what initiates the conduct of Bodhisattvas is great compassion. Its object is sentient beings.
Derda Dinamolaya, Ninji Chembodi, Tonda Parsum, the Kachewa Sadi, so Banded Dawa Tabigi. And the Omunjukolia, two in the Songoris, Omunjuvenamalia, that so Peshadi, Ninji di Gavi Loto Pusum Sobon Jomalia, Tonta Parsum, the Kachewares, Pena, and Pigitachi Nugutaji Kevalia, Tomar Kachewa, Sabi, Partu Kachewa, Chulu. Tama kechewa develop dom batan Java ani ninji di develop pusum so jomale tonda parsun kechewa re son de o did tun da songo yoras ra.
Here, in speaking of the importance of compassion, we began this section by looking at the outline that says that emphasizes the importance of compassion at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Here, Lama Tsongkhapa takes that explanation, or he bases that explanation on Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way. At the beginning of Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way, he speaks of the importance of compassion. He pays homage to compassion that is important at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And he uses analogies in order to illustrate the importance of compassion. So it says that if you want to, for example, if you want to grow a certain harvest, to begin with, you have a seed, and the seed needs to grow into a sprout. So compassion is important at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, because it is similar to the following process. It is important like the seed at the beginning. It is important in like being the water and manure or nourishment that you provide that seed in the middle. and it also important at the end in the bountiful harvest that or the bountiful yield that comes from all the process, and therefore compassion is important at the beginning like a seed, in the middle like water, and at the end like a bountiful harvest.
Then even as the lenchi sem data with gene shukyang simchen tangmangshin cheng batang labjan shindu chakangshin taye batang dukyang pangme gobon tongwana shumni tingmember tongwalas ninji chembo lenchi kebatsam member chamber to komba chebe rangi dedula medashin shandula migyowe chotamje dela zogo chedo sombanni sanje nam jebirni bi tseya tingmenshin shewar mineba namka chisigdun drewi tenzeba ya ninji chembi töde demen nyendöder gibi cher bena lodola tongmar sabenta bardu chodan tamar memba kachewa dar sanjiji lodola ya 통다 발송도 가지고 니지 임바 반된다와 잡을 송소스.
So we've read through the section that explained the importance of compassion at the beginning. Now the importance of compassion in the middle says, although you enter the Mahayana when a mind like this has arisen once, when you see the great number of dead actions of sentient beings and the great difficulty, boundless and limitless time required of the training, you may become discouraged and fall into the Hinayana. However, by familiarizing yourself increasingly with great compassion, rather than generating it just once, you will become unconcerned with your own happiness and suffering and will not despair over the welfare of others, whereby you will easily complete all the accumulations. Now, the importance of compassion at the end says, even when the Buddhas have achieved their result, they do not dwell in peace like the Hinayanis, but bring about the welfare of however many sentient beings there are through space. This is also due to the power of great compassion, for without it, they would become like Shravakas. So to summarize that, Lama Tsongkhapa here draws from the glorious Chandrakirtis in his supplement to the Milway, in which he said that for a harvest, what is important in the beginning is the seed, in the middle the water, and in the end it's ripening. Likewise, for the harvest of Buddhahood, what is important in the beginning, the end, and in the middle is compassion.
Tena shan han chong tembe chola damga shugya jikden le tong chanju gi sem gom chawa shigle mon chebala geshe tembe teni te chue damga gi tel chongala sonde chu ne kemba yenos ngeba ya dikkona kawe yang sajanta dombo ko soji sonro da gondan namle den ngeba tembu tsal gode pende mankolki kyogi ton rumbuchi zobi chanju sabendi penkyo kone nimbo ken shi 대신 kiu weminjin wemiye shesong sheba tarosa.
Shang Nachung Tumba says, although I asked the elder for instructions, nothing more came of it than let go of your worldly thoughts, cultivate bodhicitta. Geshe Tumba laughed at him and said, you got the central point of the elder's instructions. He knew the key point of the teachings, the Dharma. Since it is difficult to gain certainty about this, you must gather the accumulations and purify again and again. Study the scriptures such as the marvelous Array Sutra, as well as the commentaries, and seek firm certainty. It is the glorious Ashvagosha. It is as the glorious Ashvagosha says, referring to the Buddha. Your mind, heroic one, is precious, the seed of complete enlightenment. Only you know it as the essence, other beings do not guess it. That's all. So we will leave the text here for today. Now, Geshe is taking a week, 2
2 weeks lah, not except
2 years.
2 years.
2 years, 2 eons, 2 great countless eons break.
Good. You give me a big holiday.
Yeah.
You give me a big holiday.
Yeah, the Kasa,
2 years. I mean, okay.
The Tibetan New Year is coming up, so Geshe is taking a break. So it's not that we have a complete break. Venerable Tony is will still lead the Friday morning sessions, and we're still going to have a Sunday morning sessions as well. So please feel free to still come along. Geshe will join us again after the Tibetan New Year. So with that, thank you very much. And we'll leave it off with the recitation of the final Lamrim prayer. Just a second. For my 2 collections, past the space of the Mass, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose mind's wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. And may I find the best, complete graded parts of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means strong, but a strong force of compassion. May I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the point of the path that I've discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart growing out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I rebuild this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounty of peace. And may the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this graded path of enlightenment, completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent path, never departed in any of the lives on the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.